Hello and welcome to Chess with Simon. I'm Simon. My friend Jeremy showed me a really good chess game he'd played, a Sicilian Defence. He's a really good player, he's super smart, he's like 1600. But I just thought, let's talk about some systems we can play against a Sicilian, because I think it's good to have a system that we decide that we're going to use. Like right now, I think Jeremy's just trying to think about the best move. But I think a big step in chess is to start to adopt certain systems that we like. So this is a Sicilian, pawn e4, pawn c5. So the most commonly played system is the most complex and most difficult, which is to play an open Sicilian. So you play knight f3, and what you're trying to do is support d4. So most common move by black is d6. Then we play d4, black takes, white takes, and immediately this has defined the conflict. We often get this, black here and white here. So black has one more pawn in the center. Black will have this half open file where he can put a rook or perhaps a queen. White has more space, and this often creates a very unbalanced, a complex struggle. There are also loads of systems black can play here. So black can play the Najdorf, which is this. Black can play the dragon, which is this. The Schwenningen. And also back here, instead of d6, for instance, if black had played e6, you can get, again playing d4 and takes, that you get to the kind of Can or Paulsen systems. And if not e6, if black had played c6, knight c6, you go takes, you can get to the Sveshnikov or the Kalashnikov system. So the point about playing an open Sicilian for white is that black has a massive number of choices of interesting responses, which all have their own characteristics. Knight c3 is more associated with closed systems. So in the closed systems, we're playing d3, we're not playing d4. So very typically, black would go here, and then white might play g3, black might play g6. We're fianchettoing our bishop, because if our pawn's going to d3, then it's more natural for the bishop to come out here. Black might play d6. White can play bishop e3 and sort of queen d2, castle long, and try to create an attack down the h-file. Also playing f4, black plays e6, knight f3. This is a sort of very standard closed Sicilian idea. So the idea is we're going to castle on the king's side. We've got more space. We've got the makings of a kingside attack. Black will probably attack on the queen's side. So I would say these closed Sicilian positions, I quite like them for white. You develop your pieces. It's quite a simple plan. You can define your approach from the beginning. Black has fewer options. I think when you get to the really top levels, sometimes they become... But I think Boris Spassky played them for a long time. I've seen Magnus Carlsen win beautifully with the closed Sicilian. So that's certainly an interesting system, which is basically two knights c3 with a view to playing d3, fianchettoing the king's bishop, and either playing f4 and castling kingside, or playing bishop e3, queen d2, castling queenside, and then playing bishop h6, charging the h-pawn up the board, swapping and attacking down the h-file, assuming black has castled kingside. Another really interesting thing to play is to play pawn c3, very different. So what's great about this is that you define your approach from the second move and get onto territory that you know. The concept here is to try to play d4, so you've got two pawns in the center. You haven't quite got time to get that perfect center, because black can play like knight f6, and then white will often attack the knight moves here. White will then play d4, takes, and basically what's happening is white's building up this center, and black can sort of attack it. White defends it, but white has a bit more space. White has a center, and critically, black doesn't have all this counterplay, but based on an imbalanced position. I mean, white's pretty solid in these lines, and it's a decent line. You know, the computer says white's a bit better. It's a completely playable line. So I would say for players who like to play solidly and not give black too much play, c3 is an excellent thing. A very different style is to play d4 and c3 very quickly. So d4, black takes, c3, black takes. You take with a knight, so you've gambited a pawn here. And what white will have here is very quick attacking chances against black. Let's assume d6. I mean, there's different lines here. What basically white does is bishop c4, castles, and then queen e2. I think one player joked that players of the Smith-Morra like to play the first few moves without even looking up or looking at what black's doing. Like, it's just like queen e2, bishop c4, then you get the rooks on the d and c file. e5, okay, bishop e3, and then what's coming is probably going to be rook c1, rook a c1. You know, this sort of idea. So it's hard for the queen to get onto the c file. And this is a really good sort of way to create attacks, to create initiative, tactics for white. I mean, black is a pawn up, but the black is a backward pawn and an open file with a rook. So, you know, it's going to be really hard to make that pawn count. And black's strategy is basically to doggedly defend and hope to be up an extra pawn in the endgame. It's a fascinating. I think it's seen somewhat suspiciously at the very top levels because giving away a central pawn is a really big thing to do at the top levels. But at club level, or just for fun, it's totally playable. I've won a lot of games with this. I've also lost a lot, but I've won a lot of nice games with this line. So basically, Smith-Morra Gambit, early d4, and then also followed by c3. Is a really nice line. And then one more I'm going to show, actually two more I'm going to show. The next I'm going to show is the famous Grand Prix attack, which is to play an early f4 with basically the idea of getting an attack on the king side going. So in the old days, they used to play things like g6, knight f3, because basically you're going to have a closed position, so it makes sense to fianchetto the bishop. Knight c3, knight c6, and I think they play bishop b5 or something. And then the idea is white's castling on the king side, and you start to try to, you know, get your queen around here, get your bishop here. I mean, obviously, you know, as long as it's defended, because maybe the knights come out and it's defended by the queen. Get some kind of very direct kingside attack. This used to be very effective. The problem really with the direct Grand Prix attack now is that computers and kind of, I mean, if you look at Stockfish Depth 85, have discovered that d5 has pretty good defense for black. So either white takes, and then I think black can gambit a pawn and build up an initiative, which white players kind of hate, or white plays e5, and it's actually hard to, I mean, white gets some space on the king side, and white isn't losing, but black's actually already better. So I think the Grand Prix is a bit like the King's Gambit, again, when you move the f-pawn on the second move. White's not losing, and it's very romantic, but it's not objectively the best. It's got a lot of history. It's not objectively the best. There are also versions which are sort of hybrid closed Sicilians, where you play knight c3 first, and then you play kind of f4, which stops the d5 idea. But basically, if you're creating a structure which is just dedicated to one plan, that can often be a bit inflexible. Whereas, you know, playing knight f3 on the second move just gives you a variety of plans. I mean, one plan I didn't talk about is after they play d6, instead of playing d4, you can play bishop b5 check, which is actually a very solid and sensible, and actually very popular at the top levels, this sort of business. White can get quite nice. So if you want to play something non-theoretical, just get your pieces out. Bishop b5 check there is good, and then this is called the Rossolimo. When knight c6, you play bishop b5. It doesn't work against e6. In fact, against e6, you can even, on a bad day, and I did this in a tournament, as black, I might add, you can even get your bishop trapped as white. So I played the black side of that in a tournament in Kent. I really enjoyed that. So the thing is, against e6, you've got to do something different. But the point is, knight f3, d6, you've got these bishop b5 check ideas. Okay, the last thing I want to show is the wing gambit, which I've seen Carlsen play in a banter blitz game. Well, you know, it's not wrong. People play it. You play A3, then let's say they play something like, let's say they play E6. White can then go B4. Black takes it, and then you've got D4. Then you've got the whole centre. Black plays knight F6 to attack that pawn. Of course, there's no knight C3. You play the bishop, the knight comes out. I mean, or, you know, you can sort of see this thing where they take here, which is sort of a bit like a kind of Benko gambit type thing. But basically, you gambit these pawns here, you open some files, and you gain the centre. And it's quite hard to play against as black, because basically Sicilian players are looking for an interesting dynamic game where they get the initiative, and this way white kind of gets initiative. It's also a very different kind of territory. So in summary, there are so many lovely systems we can choose. We can choose the open Sicilian with knight F3 and D4, the closed Sicilian with knight C3, D3, bishop G3, bishop G2, and then maybe F4, knight F3 castles. The C3 Sicilian, where you play C3 and then black's either going to play knight F6 or D5 or something, but you basically build up a nice solid centre and you don't give black that dynamic compensation. D4, C3, and then you take the pawn with a knight gambit, a pawn, the Smith-Morra gambit, very exciting. Opening, and finally F4, the Grand Prix attack. I mean, good for a bit of romantic fun. I wouldn't play it in the last round of the World Championship. And A3, the wing gambit. I think you can also start with B4 probably, can't you? You can probably also start with B4, A3 and B4 in some combination. And that's all very amusing. I mean, it's fun, and it just shows the incredible richness. I think the Sicilian complexes are some of the most complex, rich, strategically rich areas of chess, along with things like the King's Indian and the Grunfeld and maybe the Nimzo. But, you know, it's really a fascinating area, and I hope you all enjoy it, and good to hear from everyone which systems they prefer and what everyone tries, including Jeremy. Enjoy your chess, everybody.